Typhoons are rare in northeast China, but recently 3 typhoons made an impact there within 2 weeks. All of China's important grain production areas have suffered severe flooding or typhoons. Recent news around Disney's film Mulan has sparked discussion over China exporting its censorship to Hollywood. Similar examples of the U.S. film industry yielding to Beijing's demands abound. Chinese military appears to have stationed bombers in areas close to the border with India. This as both sides had their first fire exchange in decades on disputed borders. And within 2 hours, China's fighter jets approached Taiwan 24 times. This as Taiwan is testing weapons off the island's coast. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now we turn to unusual weather in northeastern China. Typhoons and tropical storms are common in the country's southeastern coastal areas, though they're rare in the northeast. But this year seems to be an exception. Within 2 weeks, 1 tropical storm made landfall, while 2 others made an impact from offshore. At the end of August, Tropical Storm Bavi made landfall in North Korea and moved into China. Last Thursday, Typhoon Maisak traveled from the Korean peninsula to northeast China, bringing strong winds and more than 6 inches of rainfall with it. According to Chinese state-run media, more than 450,000 people have been affected. Elsewhere, heavy rain caused by Typhoon Haishin pelted northeastern China on Tuesday. The extra water caused more than 20 rivers to exceed their overflow warning levels. This is Songhua River in Heilongjiang Province. Its water level has almost reached the embankment, and the river is widening. One neighborhood built close to the river is now submerged. Before the flood, this area was home to a community park. While in Heilongjiang Province, the crop from an entire rice field has been drenched. The damages are so severe that the rice is no longer edible. Northeastern China is one of the country's most important agricultural areas, especially for producing grains. Major crops grown there include rice, wheat, corn, and soybeans. Under normal circumstances, these crops would just be reaching maturity and would soon be harvested. A video clip from earlier this week shows a desperate corn farmer crying in front of his field, full of almost ripe ears of corn. But the produce was destroyed due to flooding and strong winds. This year, all of China's most important grain production areas have suffered severe flooding or from typhoons. Now to Xiamen, one of China's southern coastal cities. Torrential rain struck the city on Monday, brought on by warm and cold air interacting in the region. In the 10 hours between noon and 10 p.m. local time, nearly 2 inches of rain soaked the city. It's the highest rainfall the city has seen this year. That may not seem like much, but some areas in the city are closer to sea level than others. That means even a small amount of rainfall can pool and cause flooding. Over 1,100 lightning bolts accompanied the rain, another rarity. Local authorities issued red-level warnings for heavy rain. Some streets were almost entirely submerged. One person was spotted waiting for rescue on the roof of his car, while other vehicles like motorbikes were also stopped in their tracks. Unusual weather patterns are also causing trouble in central China. Hailstones fell in parts of Hebei province on Monday, causing serious damage to the region's crops. A video circulating online shows some hailstones the size of chicken eggs. The area's normally busy streets were soon deserted, while some unlucky passerby sought shelter as hail pelted the streets. Hebei province has been spared from the severe floods that have been plaguing other parts of China in recent months. But Monday's hailstorm seems to have made some farmers anxious. One of them repeatedly said in a video that this year's crops are all ruined. So far this year, China has endured various natural disasters, including the pandemic, floods, heavy rain, mudslides, typhoons, hailstorms, locust plagues, other pests, and even plant diseases. In ancient times, Chinese people believed that natural disasters were heaven's response to human misconduct, particularly to injustice. The nightmare of private property confiscation strikes again after 6 decades. $1 million properties were taken away by the CCP regime overnight with the help of police and urban management staff.
Police came to place seals on residents' private property, announcing that they now belong to the state. Their actions followed an announcement by local authorities. Anyone refusing to comply was taken away by police. In Pingyao County, a place with rich historical interests located in North China, a document from the authorities announced socialist transformation was to take place. It meant the CCP regime was taking away properties from over 200 families overnight. These properties had been passed down in each family. A Pingyao resident, Wang Juyan, going by a pseudonym to protect her identity, ran a small hotel on her inherited property until it was seized by local authorities. Wang told the Epoch Times that this has happened to over 210 families in her county so far. The document states that private properties with rental space can be defined as objects of the socialist transformation, and those private properties identified as such belong to the state. Even though the properties were inherited by the owners from their ancestors, the Chinese Communist Party had taken them away during the 1950s and did not return them to the owners until 2009. But now, with a single notice, the regime once again confiscated their property.
So they again and again lock my property, again and again drag people outside.
The residents were ordered to move in 15 days and hand in their title deeds. Wang said just a few days after the notice was issued, they came to lock Wang's property.
We tried to negotiate, but before we could say anything, they slapped and pushed an 80-year-old man 3 steps backwards, and 3 police together beat my husband in the yard. Then they dragged us to the police station.
Days later, many people came again. They went straight to put seals on Wang's house, and the seals read, People's Government of Pingyao County. Wang said in the video guests still lived there, but they already put seals on the door. The deputy county head said, It's no use to stir up trouble. We will definitely take your properties. You can sue whoever you want. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
Now we take a look at the new development in the Chinese Inner Mongolia region. The Chinese Communist Party is not only trying to suppress the Mongolian language, but is also destroying symbols of Mongolian culture. The Mongolian yurt is one of them. A video showed a public place in Inner Mongolia with a construction symbolizing the Mongolian yurt being pulled down. A comment on social media reads, a new version of the Cultural Revolution, a kind of hysteria from the leaders when they feel their reign is in crisis. The Chinese Communist Party's suppression in the Inner Mongolia region sparked division within the party, even among some from the second generation of CCP leaders from the early times. Earlier this week, Chinese-American scholar Han Liangchao tweeted a public letter from a group who in the late 60s and early 70s were educated urban youths that worked as farmers in Inner Mongolia. These people were sent to poor areas in the countryside as part of a political campaign by the Communist Party when they were in their teens or 20s. The current party head, Xi Jinping, was one of them. The letter says Beijing's language policy in Inner Mongolia is ruining political stability. It urges Beijing to take back the policy and worries that Xi will turn Inner Mongolia into a second Xinjiang. The screenshot taken on the 5th of this month shows nearly 20 signatures. The leading signature was from Ma Xiaoli, an influential CCP member from a prominent Communist Party family. It said that she grew up together with Xi Jinping. After Monday's clash, tensions between India and China are still on the rise. Online, Chinese military recently took to social media, posted what appear to be threats towards India. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
In the middle of ongoing tensions, China appears to be making veiled threats toward India. The Chinese military posted footage of a defense drill on social media this Wednesday. It said one of its troops conducted the drill in a northwestern desert. The phrase often refers to China's Xinjiang region. Xinjiang borders India's Ladakh, where the two countries are in the midst of a dispute. China also appears to have sent bombers to areas bordering India. A different branch of China's military posted photos of bombers in another area. The caption said troops had been stationed on a high plateau. The term often refers to Tibet, which also borders India. The caption also added, "We're ready to fight at any time, as long as there's a demand." The move comes after a border clash on Monday. India and China accused each other of firing warning shots during the conflict. It's the first time in decades that gunshots were fired at the disputed border. Photos later emerged of Chinese soldiers armed with spears and rifles. India's NDTV reported that it indicates China may have intended to stir up a physical conflict. Also on Tuesday, an Indian official confirmed the 5 young people who went missing last week were found in China. Just a day ago, China denied having any knowledge about them. The missing young people work for the Indian Army. They were originally a group of 7, while 2 of them reportedly managed to escape. The Indian Army contacted their Chinese counterparts after they disappeared. The transfer process for the 5 to be sent back home is now in progress. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Now to Hong Kong, where the U.S. government reportedly sold a property for consulate staff located in an upscale neighborhood. That's as the Chinese regime increases its suppression of the city's freedom. According to the South China Morning Post, the tender closed at the end of July. The U.S. consulate in Hong Kong said the sale is expected to close in December, but refused to disclose the winning buyer or its selling price. The estimated value of the property is over $400 million. The U.S. consulate explained on Wednesday that the decision to sell was business-related and would not affect its operations in Hong Kong. The property was put up for sale in May, shortly after Beijing's communist regime issued a proposal for its national security law over Hong Kong. The law went into effect at the end of June. It's widely criticized by the West for cracking down on Hong Kong's freedom and autonomy. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Chinese Communist Party or CCP officials involved. Not long after the law took effect, both China and the U.S. shut down consulates in each other's territory. According to Taipei-based newspaper Liberty Times, China's People's Liberation Army fighter jets approached Taiwan 24 times within 2 hours on Wednesday. The report says the jets approached the southwest area of Taiwan between around 7 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. The statement from Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense says the Chinese fighter jets entered Taiwan's southwest air defense identification zone. These aircrafts were then chased off by Taiwanese warplanes. The invasion followed Taiwan's weapons tests off the island's coast. The tests are expected to continue on Thursday. The full details of the weapons being tested is not known. Local military experts said it could include surface-to-air missiles, long-range supersonic cruise missiles, and anti-ship cruise missiles. All of these weapons have long ranges. As for U.S.-China relations, a new survey found U.S. companies in China are becoming increasingly worried that trade tensions between the world's 2 biggest economies will drag out. The American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai and Chinese consultancy PwC recently conducted an annual business sentiment survey. Half of all the firms that responded said they believe the soured relations will last at least 3 years. That's a steep rise from 30% in 2019.
So 71% of our respondents say that of looking at the next 5 years, their top challenge to their business is going to be the U.S.-China relationship.
Of those, 27% said they believe tensions will last indefinitely. That's compared with just 13% last year.
This Beijing-Washington dialogue, they need to work this out because it's having an impact on business performance here.
Nearly a third reported that their ability to retain staff had also been affected. U.S.-China tensions, already high after last year's trade war, have further intensified this year due to the pandemic. And as Washington blacklists or threatens to blacklist Chinese technology companies on national security grounds. President Trump again raised the idea of separating the U.S. and Chinese economies this week, a possibility known as decoupling. He suggested that the U.S. would not lose money even if the countries no longer did business. Recent news around Disney's film Mulan has sparked discussion over China exporting its censorship to Hollywood. Similar examples of the U.S. film industry yielding to Beijing's demands abound.
The 2006 zombie novel World War Z tells the story of how a type of infectious zombie virus triggered a global crisis. In the novel, the virus originated from China, and because of the Chinese regime's cover-up, it spread to the entire world. In 2013, Paramount Studios made a movie out of it, featuring Hollywood star Brad Pitt. But there was one problem for the promising blockbuster. The origin of the pandemic couldn't be China because it might anger Beijing. Media reports show movie producers were advised to drop the China reference, so in the film's final version, the potential origin of the virus became South Korea. This is just one example cited in a recent report on China's influence over Hollywood. The report was published by rights group PEN America and explored how Chinese authorities were able to censor Hollywood content that cast China in a negative light. China's movie market raked in over $11 billion last year, second only to the U.S. Beijing allows only 34 international films to be screened in the country each year. Aside from rooting out unfavorable narratives about Beijing, Chinese authorities also tend to boost those that cast China positively.
You see these big action thrillers where, the Chinese step in and save the planet at the last moment. And that's no coincidence. They are doing this because Beijing demands it and the Hollywood studios comply.
According to former Hollywood film producer and media executive Chris Fenton, another example comes as blockbuster film Point Break's 2015 remake. In an earlier interview with the Epoch Times program American Thought Leaders, Fenton explained how Chinese authorities were able to insert their narrative into the movie. The film's opening is set in the Chinese city of Shanghai.
So we worked with the Shanghai municipal government, which is where the Shanghai locations took, or the China locations took place. And we said, what do you want your skyline to look like 40 years in the future? And we created all kinds of different designs.
He said the Shanghai authorities initially didn't like the idea of time travel for fear of losing control of the narrative of where the future is going. But they changed their minds after seeing the design.
The movie created the backdrop of what we envision Shanghai to be, the center of the world, the most beautiful, sophisticated, technology-advanced city on Earth. That's what the movie's showcasing. So why wouldn't we let this in? Why wouldn't we want the public to see it here in China? And by the way, we want the rest of the world to see it too, and the rest of the world did. It made a lot of money, and it was a very successful film.
The effect of the propaganda also stretched beyond China's borders.
And I'll tell you right now, the person in Indiana or the person in Brazil or the person in Germany didn't even notice the fact that there was a little bit of soft power that they digested from the CCP in that movie, because the movie was entertaining and engaged them.
The last Hollywood film that significantly touched on the dark side of China is probably the 1997 film 7 Years in Tibet. The movie, also featuring Brad Pitt, tells the story of an Austrian mountaineer's friendship with Tibet's spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, in the 1940s and 50s. At the time, the Dalai Lama was still a teenager. The movie depicted the Chinese military's bloody invasion of Tibet and persecution of Tibetan monks, triggering strong reactions of the Chinese regime. The film's French director was banned from entering China. He later published an apology in Chinese, calling Tibet part of China's territory, and that he regretted his film brought negative effect after being broadcast in China. The director also added that becoming friends with the Dalai Lama is out of question. He was granted permission to enter China again and film in Inner Mongolia. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
More than 160 human rights groups are calling to revoke the 2022 Winter Games set to be held in Beijing. They say the human rights crisis across China is worsening.
Over 160 human rights groups have delivered a joint letter to the International Olympic Committee. They want the chief of the committee to reconsider his choice to hold the 2022 Winter Games in Beijing. It is the largest coordinated effort for the cause so far. Other individual rights groups have voiced similar calls for months. Beijing is facing increased international backlash over certain policies. Those include the treatment of ethnic Uyghurs in Xinjiang and new security laws in Hong Kong. The letter said that the human rights crisis is worsening in all areas under Beijing's control, and that the IOC shouldn't ignore human rights issues or it would damage the Olympic spirit and the reputation of the Olympic Games. Uyghur, Tibetan, Hong Kong, and Mongolian rights groups based in various continents are among those who signed the letter. The committee responded that they remain neutral on global political issues. According to them, holding the Olympic Games in a certain country does not mean that they agree with the human rights standards there. Human Rights Watch and 300 other civil society groups released another separate open letter on Wednesday. They called for the UN to set up an independent international mechanism to monitor the human rights situation in China.
And China's loss is Taiwan's gain, last month at least. Huawei rushed to buy chips before new restrictions came into play. It helped boost Taiwan's exports by over 8% year-on-year. It's the highest monthly tally on record. Huawei stockpiling gave Taiwanese suppliers an estimated $1.5 to $2 billion. The United States banned suppliers from selling it chips made using U.S. technology. Taiwanese chips fall into that category. Taiwan is home to the world's largest contract chip maker, TSMC. It says it stopped taking new orders from Huawei several months ago. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.